Hey guys, I'm Jax, and this is my spoiler review for the first episode of the first season of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, the second Game of Thrones spin-off based off George R. R. Martin's books, The Hedge Knight, a second one, which I can't remember the name of, and I think the third one is called The Mystery Knight? Potentially. But I know them as A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which this show has got its name based off. They are three short stories that follow the adventures of Dunk and Egg, set in between Hot D and Game of Thrones. And I'm usually never a book guy. Like, anytime I watch a movie or a show based off a book, I'm always the non-book guy. And I don't really come from it from like I've read the books, I'm curious how they're going to adapt this kind of way. So it was really surreal to be finally a book boy and finally watching something where it was like, I'm just so curious to see like how they're going to adapt it, what they're going to stay true to, how they're going to expand upon it, because it is such a short story. At least the first one, The Hedge Knight, which season 1 is based off. Like, will the characters look and feel the way I expect them to? Just so many different thoughts and questions, and overall I'm pretty pleasantly surprised. I guess just Game of Thrones, my mind is always a little bit negative and pessimistic now with like how it's going to vibe, but I got hyped for this. Like, I even got out of the cupboard my Game of Thrones shirt. I dusted it off. I wore it for the first time in like 7 years. I did think I actually threw this shirt away. I thought I threw it away, put it in a bin, lit the bin on fire, and then just left that out to like, burn. But apparently I didn't do that, and that must have just been a very pleasant dream I had post season 8 of Game of Thrones. But outside of the casting, the adaptions, the extensions, and all of these different things, and how they were going to do them in this show compared to the book, the one thing I was most curious about was, okay, so Hot D did something that I thought was pretty lazy, and I'm surprised isn't more controversial, in that with the opening credits, the opening theme song, they just did Ramin Djawadi's masterpiece, Game of Thrones main title song. I understand, it's a masterpiece. It's maybe the greatest opening main title song of all time. But like, just to redo it again, like the exact same score, so lazy. It just felt so strange to me to do it like that. And so I was like, we can't have 3 in a row. We can't have 2 spin-offs both stealing the theme song. That was probably the thing I was most curious about. Like, how are they going to do this? And the show starts, it's pretty much word for word from the start of the Hedge Knight book. And I'm like, okay, this is pretty good. He's pretty good. They've nailed it. They're like sticking to the books really closely. And then it builds up. The music, the Game of Thrones music starts playing. And despite season 8 kind of ruining my life and making me question my very existence, and it still, when I think about it, it like hurts me deep in my soul. Despite that, hearing the music, I got amped. I got pumped up. I'm like, okay, here we fucking go. He's got the sword out, and I'm like, oh my god, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Let's fucking smash cut to him taking a shit. Overwhelmed. I thought it was maybe the single greatest smash cut to something I didn't expect I've ever seen. I couldn't stop laughing for like a minute. It was so gorgeous. It felt like a meta, literal shitting on Hot D for just doing the main theme song again. It felt like it was shitting literally on the audience for expecting that. I actually thought it was so insanely funny and brilliant, and it's such a good way to so quickly go, hey, this is not going to be Game of Thrones at all. This isn't even going to be Hot D. Big, epic, grand, like end of the world, dramatic, epic stakes. No. This is quaint. This is small. This is going to be just a beautiful, cozy, beautiful little show that's also, because it's set in Game of Thrones, incredibly crude and crass, and just, we're going to have our main character literally shitting instead of having an opening credits for our very first pilot episode. I mean, magnificent, beautiful, perfect. I just, mwah, chef's kiss. I don't know if I really have anything else to say, because I really feel like that sums up everything about this show. It is way sillier and cruder than I was expecting, but I'm kind of on board for that, because it's about the small folk, the little guy. We're just following Dunk as he just like runs about and does a big A Knight's Tale, but set in Game of Thrones. I really think it was kind of perfect. I am so curious, though, to see people who particularly haven't read the book, not to be like a book snob or anything, but just like, I knew it was going to be small and quaint and it's just A Knight's Tale, but he's really tall and it's in Game of Thrones. Like, I'm so curious to see what people who don't know what this is going to be react to and feel with this episode, because it's almost like a sitcom in comparison to how epic and big and like grand and royal and oh, it's so serious. Even though there's humor and jokes and all this stuff, Game of Thrones is just such a vibe. And this is just like the polar opposite. And it just kind of happens to be set there. So you're hearing Baratheons and Lannisters and Targaryens and all this kind of stuff, but it's so different tonally. So I'm curious how people are going to vibe that. I do think taking a shit on the opening credits is the perfect way to set it up. And I think everything that follows is really good. Like, it just sits in the show. It just sits in this environment. We just hang out. There's like a full 5-minute dancing scene. Just utterly delightful. And it's so beautiful to see, like, it just take its time. I was curious to see, like, are they going to maybe really, like, focus on, like, the action? Are they going to fast forward? Are they going to add more action and this and that? Not really. It seems to be the opposite, where they're going to take their time and really just like let the characters sit and talk and hang out. I just thought it was such a necessary and beautiful breath of fresh air compared to Game of Thrones and Hot D. Just emotionally and tonally, it's such a good counterbalance. Like, it's so cool to have stories where they're like, I'm the royal person and I should be sitting on the Iron Throne, and people are killing each other and slicing throats and everyone's killing babies left, right and center and all that Game of Thrones stuff. Whereas this one, it's just like, he's like, man, I'd really like to play in this tourney to get some more money. And the guy's like, no. And he's like, damn, I guess I'll try another avenue to get into this tourney. And it's just like, so beautifully quaint and small, and just seeing this little story take place. I was so utterly charmed and delighted. I thought it was so, so good. One aspect that was kind of lost in the Game of Thrones TV show compared to the Song of Ice and Fire books is that inner monologue, the characters always thinking and talking to themselves. That was an aspect that was essentially lost. We never really got that inner, like, kind of workings of their minds that much. Sometimes they would voice them in conversations and stuff like that. But generally speaking, it was kind of like lost in terms of translation. But with so much going on and so many different characters, that's kind of fine. Whereas when you're focusing just on a story where it's essentially two main characters, but particularly Dunk being the main character, and it's so much about Dunk's like inner monologues and his like thoughts as he's dealing with all these situations, and it really is such a POV of Dunk. And I was like, I wonder how they're going to do that. Is it just going to be kind of more dialogue, talking to people? Will it be more him saying his thoughts to Egg and, conversation? And at first they just go, I don't know, man, why doesn't he just, talk to his horses? And I thought that was pretty fun and silly, and such a beautifully simple way to just get across a bunch of exposition and inner thoughts. And also, it just was like so similar to the character from Frozen, Kristoff and Sven, where he talks to his reindeer. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure I'm going to get that image out of my mind ever. It's honestly so similar in visual and vibe. I presume it's a reference, and I am expecting Dunk to sing with his horse at one point as a beautiful nod to Frozen, which I was about to say is underrated, but maybe it's just underrated to people who aren't 7-year-old children, specifically girl children. It's a good movie, I'll stand by it. Another aspect of this that I absolutely loved, and was another thing that I kind of felt like was lacking in Game of Thrones, and that is like flashbacks and cutaways and like moments where two characters will be saying a thing and talking about a thing, and you're kind of like, man, the world's so big and expansive. I would love to just see a little snapshot over there of like what they're talking about to really make the world feel bigger and like really just give life to it visually. But of course, with Game of Thrones, with like a budget where it's like, we can only afford to do so much, and it's already like trying to do the most it can with its budget. Of course, if Littlefinger is having a conversation with someone and referencing something that happened to him 10 years ago, we're not going to cut away to boy Littlefinger doing that thing. They just don't have the budget for that. And so with Game of Thrones, that was always struggling to, like, the story was this big, the budget was this big. This is a story where the story is this big and the budget is this big. And so they're able to just cut away, like it's almost like a Family Guy skit where it just cuts away to a silly little aside. And I just thought that was so fun and such a good way to utilize and weaponize the budget to really make it go the full distance in a way that a show like Hot D or Game of Thrones just could never do. You just don't have the budget to do that. Because the show isn't like a sitcom where it's just cutting to another office and they can just film that any time. You're cutting to another field when there's nights and there's people, and it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. You get it. That first cutaway and just knowing the book, just having recently reread it or listened to it or whatever, that scene where he's just like, cutaway, punch, I was just like, honestly, that kind of stylized, like it's barely stylized, it's not like Danny Boyle stylized, but it's like that stylistic kind of like vibe and energy was something that I feel like was missed. Like I love Game of Thrones, obviously until I didn't, but I was obsessed with it. But one of the things I did kind of wish it had, particularly because when it was coming out along with Breaking Bad, was just like a little bit of that oomph, a little bit of that style to spice up some of the scenes. I really feel like the only time I can think of a scene feeling like it had a bit of oomph and filmmaking style outside of just the traditional Game of Thrones vibe that it created very early on and stuck to, which I love, is in season 7, I want to say, where Sam is doing a montage of working at the Citadel, and it's like a really fast, quick montage of people shitting and people like eating and shitting, and he's just cleaning it up, and it had that boom, 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 had like a Breaking Bad style editing vibe. Which I loved. I thought it was one of the most unique, fun scenes, and we just didn't get enough of that in Game of Thrones. And so I'm really hoping that these cutaways and these little jokes we get in this first episode is a sign of bigger and grander and better things to come in terms of filmmaking style, because I just think this is the show where you have the budget to do that, and I'm excited for it. It's honestly so exciting, and I hope they really play into the humor of it. So the actor who plays Dunk is amazing. I think he really embodies the character. He's exactly how I imagined him. He brings a lot of heart and soul, a lot of humor already. I just feel like already I can just see everything that he has to do in at least the first 3 seasons, because there's only 3 books, unfortunately. I can just really envision all the things that he needs to do, and it's just going to work. He's going to absolutely nail it. I love him so very much, and I cannot wait for that inevitable moment in which we do a season 4, and we go beyond the books. And, his character, his portrayal, and the series itself breaks my heart. But until that day, I'll just love it. I'll just have fun with it. And I'm just going to not think about the fact that we'll almost definitely 100% get a season 4 before there's a 4th book. Because there's not going to be a 4th book. Because he said he's not going to write a 4th Dunk and Egg book until he's finished Winds of Winter. A book that is not coming out. I promised I wouldn't get Game of Thronesy on this review and keep it Dunk and Eggy, nice and cozy and comfortable. We're having fun. We're not thinking about Game of Thrones. I can feel the shirt. It feels like it's tightening on my soul, and I'm just getting so deeply sad. Speaking of which, there was a moment. There was one moment when there was a beautiful puppet show thing happening. Big puppets. I'm just saying puppet show because that's in the books a lot. I'd say it's more than a puppet show. When the big dragon thing, and she's like, we're doing a dragon show. I did, great scene. I loved it, but I did get this real pain in my chest and this just deep, almost nostalgia, but the opposite of nostalgia, sadness for the past. And it did hit me like a wave. The way that Hot D does at times. And I'm just reminded that instead of getting Game of Thrones season 9 or 12 at this point and wrapping up that back half, the 3rd act of the entire A Song of Ice and Fire series, instead of the budget of this being utilized for that, a story I just adored so very much and was too obsessed with, I am watching Dunk and Egg. A show that is going to be utterly delightful, but not something that I'm going to discuss with friends and theorize and just obsess over and just discuss and think about ad nauseum, which is probably healthier for me, in general. I feel like in the last 6 years, I've probably been a more healthy human being. I've expanded my scope beyond one single little series. It wasn't that little, it was pretty fucking big and awesome. But so, in some ways, it's better that it sucks and that I'm not just continuously rewatching it. I do other things now. But this show it just threw me back to 2016, where just, I just, yeah, I do mourn the fact that Game of Thrones is not as perfect and good, and yeah. And we're watching a different Game of Thrones thing, and like, yeah, it's good. I loved it. I loved it. I genuinely loved it. I would have loved quite a lot more, a significantly large amount more, if this budget and just everyone who loved this universe was just making Game of Thrones. And, you know, yeah, I can't imagine anybody else feels differently. Bring on 5 more episodes that I love, but do remind me that I'll never be truly happy. I do wonder if Game of Thrones had ended well and people still loved it and were obsessed with it and just loved it so very, very much and weren't just like really sad and annoyed by it, would they have enough goodwill to call this series Dunk and Egg? Because it's colloquially called Dunk and Egg. Like, I don't tell anybody like, oh, have you read the 3 short stories that are in the big book together called A Night of the Seven Kingdoms? You go like, have you read Dunk and Egg? And like texting friends, being like, did you know Dunk and Egg's out? I'm not like, did you know the show A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is out? It's like, it's called Dunk and Egg. To everybody, I just would have loved the series to be called Dunk and Egg. I just think that'd be so funny and cool and would fit with the kind of simplistic and crude and just, it's Game of Thrones, but it's more like Game of Thrones. I just think that would be a delightful title. That's what we're all going to call it anyway, so who gives a fuck? And of course, Dunk and Egg, they meet, they have a couple of interactions. We don't really deep dive into their relationship yet, but I feel like their chemistry, it plays really, really well. Egg's very funny. Dunk is a bit like, this little kid. And of course, you can see what it's going to be setting up. No spoilers for future things, but it is a classic lone wolf and cub situation, which I think actually, like legally, since last year, we don't call it the lone wolf and cub anymore. I think it's just called pulling a Pedro Pascal. And luckily, Pedro Pascal was in Game of Thrones, because otherwise he would have forced his way into the show. At least his agent would have. Whoever on his team love him doing a Pedro Pascal all over something. Yeah, so I am glad Pedro Pascal isn't in this, being the father figure looking after a little child character and maybe learning something from him. We've seen too much of that. I'm sick of Pedro Pascal pulling a Pedro Pascal. Overall, I absolutely loved this. It was super, super fun and delightful. I am curious, like, the longevity of, like, how this is going to go week to week. Like, is there going to be much to, like, think about and discuss? Because, like, just knowing the story, there's going to be some big, really crazy, awesome stuff, but that'll all just be on the finale. So I'm curious how they're going to make this work as a season. Like, I almost wonder, would this have worked Netflix style and just released it all at once? Because rereading the books, I was kind of like, man, this feels like a perfect movie. But already they've expanded so much. The Laughing Storm is in it way more. He danced for 5 minutes. He doesn't dance for 5 minutes in the books. So maybe they're just going to expand it like that and make it really feel like a really rich, big world, so that when the explosive finale happens, it actually like is a bigger punch emotionally. There's probably some more work they can do in terms of the actual arcs of Dunk and particularly Egg in this first book. So I wonder if they're just going to really expand it and enrich all of that stuff, because so far all the additions like onto the book, it's been really fantastic. Like, I was quite surprised, if I'm going to be honest, because so much of it is word for word, line for line from the book. And then suddenly they'll just be like, here's a 5-minute scene that's not in the books. And it's really good. And it doesn't feel tonally off. It doesn't feel like I'm watching them stitch in their own stuff to the book. It feels really organic and natural and beautiful. And I love it. It's a good show. Curious if there's going to be anything to discuss review-wise for 3 or 4 episodes. But hey, you'll know, depending on if there's another review by me, Jax. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment below. I would love to know, what did you think about the first episode of Dunk and Egg?